In 1968, a secret CIA helicopter carrying 15 soldiers vanished over the Mekong Delta. No crash, no wreckage, no trace. But 57 years later, when construction workers found the chopper buried deep in the Vietnamese jungle, they also found something impossible: a survivor. And what she remembers will expose the darkest secret of the Vietnam War. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover the stories they tried to bury and make sure no hero stays forgotten. The call came at 6:47 a.m., March 15, 2025. Major Daniel Harrison was drinking his first coffee when the radio crackled through his apartment in Ho Chi Minh City. Construction crew near Tay Ninh province has unearthed what appears to be a US military helicopter. Serial numbers match a long-closed missing persons case. Harrison stood frozen in his kitchen, the mug burning his palm. He didn't need to check the files. He knew the case by heart. 15 soldiers, one helicopter, vanished March 15, 1968. Exactly 57 years ago to the day. Operation Phoenix, the classified mission that officially never existed. 30 minutes later, Harrison stood beside the excavation site. The helicopter's twisted metal emerged from decades of jungle growth like a grave being opened. Vietnamese officials maintained respectful distance as American forensics teams began their work. But what they found inside made Harrison's blood run cold. The serial number was impossible. According to military records, this Huey had been destroyed in a training accident at Fort Rucker, Alabama in 1967. Yet here it was, half a world away, in a jungle where it was never supposed to exist. But that wasn't the shocking part. Inside the wreckage, forensics discovered a waterproof case containing mission documents that should have been incinerated decades ago. 15 names. 15 American soldiers volunteered for what the papers called deep cover psychological operations. At the bottom of the roster, someone had written a note in red ink. Integration successful. Subjects relocated to permanent facility. Harrison stared at the documents, his hands shaking. These weren't combat casualties. These were test subjects. But the real shock came 3 days later. Harrison was reviewing the case files when his aide burst into the office. "Sir, there's a woman at the front gate. She says she's one of them." At the US consulate entrance stood an elderly Vietnamese woman, maybe 70 years old, weathered by decades of tropical sun. She looked up at Harrison with familiar green eyes and spoke in perfect English with an unmistakable American accent. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. Serial number 19847562. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, April 12, 1949. I've been waiting 57 years to come home." Harrison nearly dropped his clipboard. According to the documents, Sarah Mitchell had been 19 when she disappeared. The woman before him appeared to be in her early 70s. The math was impossible, but her knowledge was flawless. She knew details about the mission, about her fellow soldiers, about military procedures that only the real Sarah Mitchell could know. "Ma'am," Harrison said carefully, "can you tell me about March 15th, 1968? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "We loaded onto that helicopter at dawn, told it was a reconnaissance mission near Cambodia, but the pilot wasn't Army, wasn't Air Force. When Patterson asked who he was, the man just smiled and said we'd understand soon enough." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We never made it to Cambodia. We made it somewhere much worse." The story that emerged over the following hours defied every assumption about missing soldiers in Vietnam. Sarah described being taken not to a prisoner camp, but to an American facility hidden deep in the jungle. A research station that didn't exist on any map, run by scientists who claimed they were developing techniques to help POWs resist enemy interrogation. But as Sarah's account continued, it became clear they weren't developing resistance techniques. They were perfecting control techniques. "They gave us new identities," Sarah explained, her weathered hands trembling. "Said our families thought we were dead. Said it was necessary for national security. The experiment started small: sleep deprivation, sensory manipulation, chemical treatments they claimed would make us better soldiers." Harrison recorded every word, knowing this testimony would never appear in any official report. "What kind of experiments?" Sarah's voice cracked. "They wanted to know how long they could keep soldiers operational in hostile territory without losing effectiveness, how much memory they could erase without destroying personality, how completely they could rebuild someone's identity. The implications were staggering. American soldiers used as laboratory subjects in psychological experiments that violated every international law. But Sarah's account grew darker. Some of the others started forgetting, she continued. Tommy Martinez forgot his mother's name. Jessica Chen forgot she had a sister. The doctors said it was progress. They were becoming more adaptable, more useful. Harrison leaned forward. What happened to them? The ones who forgot everything were transferred to other facilities, the ones who remembered too much. Sarah didn't finish, but her meaning was clear. How did you survive? Sarah managed a bitter smile. I learned to pretend. Pretended the treatments were working. Pretended I was forgetting my real name, my real family. For 27 years I played the perfect test subject while secretly keeping a journal hidden in my mattress. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In 1995, a new administrator arrived, someone who'd never been briefed on the original mission. He reviewed our files, saw we'd been there nearly 3 decades, and ordered an immediate shutdown. They relocated us to villages throughout Vietnam, gave us new identities as war widows. We were told that revealing our true identities would result in charges of desertion and treason. Harrison's mind raced. Why come forward now? Because I heard about the helicopter. Word travels fast in rural communities. I knew they'd try to cover it up again, make us disappear again. But I'm old now, and I'm tired of being a ghost. Over the following week, as Harrison worked with Vietnamese authorities to verify Sarah's story, the unthinkable happened. Other elderly Americans began appearing at the consulate. Each claimed to be a long-lost soldier. Each had similar stories of psychological experimentation and forced silence. DNA tests confirmed the impossible. These people were who they claimed to be. The Pentagon's response was swift and predictable. They acknowledged that something had happened, but maintained that any research conducted had been authorized and necessary for national security. The facility, they claimed, had been a legitimate intelligence operation that got extended beyond its original parameters. But Vietnamese investigators had found the facility Sarah described. Deep in Tai Ninh province, hidden beneath decades of jungle growth, stood a complex of underground laboratories that told a different story. Files recovered from sealed chambers documented not just psychological experiments, but chemical and biological testing that had used American soldiers as unwilling subjects for nearly 3 decades. Dr. Nguyen Van Duc, the Vietnamese historian investigating the case, described what they found as systematic human experimentation on a scale that rivals the worst atrocities of the 20th century. The political implications exploded across international headlines. Congressional investigations were launched. Families who had grieved for decades suddenly faced the impossible reunion with children, siblings, and spouses they thought were dead. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial had to add names of soldiers who weren't actually dead, but had been systematically erased from existence. Sarah Mitchell, now living in a small apartment in Ho Chi Minh City, became the face of one of America's most shameful military secrets. Her story inspired investigations that uncovered similar programs, revealing a network of experimental facilities that had operated throughout the Cold War. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery came from Sarah's hidden journal, recovered from the facility. 27 years of entries written in tiny handwriting on scraps of paper and hidden in mattress seams. The journal documented not just her own experiences, but the systematic destruction of 14 other American soldiers who had volunteered to serve their country and ended up as test subjects in experiments that destroyed their minds, their identities, and ultimately their lives. The entry that haunted investigators the most was dated December 25th, 1985. Tommy asked me today what Christmas was. He genuinely didn't remember. They've stolen 17 years of Christmas from him, and he doesn't even know it. I pretended I didn't remember either, but inside I'm screaming. We are still American soldiers. We still deserve to come home. 3 months after Sarah Mitchell walked back into American custody, she stood before the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. Her name, along with those of her 14 fellow soldiers, had been added to the black granite wall. The ceremony was small, attended by families who had waited 57 years for answers and justice that would never fully come. But as Sarah ran her fingers over her own engraved name, she spoke words that echoed far beyond the memorial. We never stopped being soldiers. We never stopped trying to serve our country. What they did to us in that jungle was wrong, but we survived it, and now the world knows our story. The helicopter that started it all remains in storage at a Vietnamese military facility, a twisted monument to secrets that took decades to surface. The underground laboratories have been sealed and designated as a memorial to victims of unauthorized human experimentation. But questions remain. How many other facilities operated in secret? How many other soldiers disappeared into classified programs that treated American servicemen as expendable test subjects? How many families are still waiting for answers that may never come? Sarah Mitchell's story represents not just a historical tragedy, but a warning about the dangers of unchecked authority and the ease with which military necessity can be used to justify the unjustifiable. The 15 soldiers of Operation Phoenix thought they were volunteers for a dangerous but honorable mission. Instead, they became casualties of a war that continued in secret long after the official fighting ended. Their story serves as a reminder that some battles for truth and justice continue decades after the wars themselves have ended. Fought in courtrooms and congressional hearing rooms by survivors who refused to let their sacrifice be forgotten, or their stories be buried in classified files that may never see the light of day. The jungle may keep its secrets well, but some truths are too important to remain buried forever. Every day we share stories of courage and sacrifice that deserve to be remembered. If these forgotten heroes inspired you, please subscribe to Untold Legends Stories and hit the notification bell to make sure you never miss the stories they tried to bury. Your support helps us bring these important tales to light. Like this video if it moved you, and share your thoughts in the comments below. These veterans waited 57 years to have their voices heard. Let's make sure their stories reach everyone who needs to hear them.